Greetings YouTube viewers and fellow Final Fantasy fans, this is Final Fantasy Fan 012 and welcome to another live stream on my show. This time, and we are doing some analysis on logos of Final Fantasy from the Famicom era to the Super Famicom era. And this will be much more in parts, and considering how large this series very much is we'll I'll be segmenting it into several different parts. So we'll be going over the mainline titles first. And as in this title, I'll be going over the Famicom to the Super Famicom era Final Fantasy games before eventually covering some other Final Fantasy spin-offs sometime in the future after we're finally finished with the mainline Final Fantasy games. So now we are going over the analysis to other Final Fantasy logos, and without further ado, let us get started. And what better way to start off than... present the screen for one moment. Share the screen. There we go. Alright. Alright, starting off with Final Fantasy 1, specifically going with... Starting off with the original logo in Final Fantasy. This is actually the original logo from the Famicom release, with the logo being in katakana, and this is being more so of a crystalline logo due to the heavy importance of the crystals in the game, and being since your entire journey in Final Fantasy 1 is about saving the crystals, and it's because of that, and why crystals specifically as being chosen to drive the plot forward in Final Fantasy is because crystals were pretty much used as a common trope in fantasy, and so this game made it much more of the driving force, and it's because of that crystals had became pretty major parts throughout the Final Fantasy series, thanks to the first game, whether playing a major or minor role throughout the series. And this logo was featured in the original box art of the Famicom release, which shows this guy is the Warrior of Light based on the Yoshitaka Amano artwork, which there was actually a concept design being based on the sprite design of the warrior class, but this was specifically designed to keep but having more of the design with this one, but yet adding in more details, so much so that that Warrior of Light is actually used for the new logo in the WonderSwan release of the original Final Fantasy, using the Warrior of Light. And this plays much more of a heavy importance because the entire game is focused on the Warriors of Light, because this is the Warriors of Light journey, and being with your journeys, and specifically your journey as you, the player, are the Warriors of Light in this game, since the Warriors of Light are very much avatar characters in the game. And so now, moving on to Final Fantasy II, we have a completely different logo now. Instead using the crystalline logo, since crystals don't actually play a part in Final Fantasy II, and instead use actually more of a draconic design for the Final Fantasy logo, because the F in the front and final is actually a dragon's head, and the 2 being used in the Roman numerals. But yet this is actually kept for the blue. This is the only part that is blue, since that was the color from the previous title. But yet the lighter purple is already used for this. Sorry, I'm stumbling on my words. For this specific title, which so much so, actually, and once again, this was used in the original box art design for the Famicom release of the game, which used this specific picture of Firion. But yet later, when the game was re-released for the WonderSwan in 2001, the purple logo still kept the same, though instead of using Firion as the main character, it instead used the game's main antagonist, Emperor Mateus, and the purple is kept as a constant theme, due to foreshadowing of the final dungeon in the game, Castle Pandemonium. Moving on to Final Fantasy III, it does use the same logo as Final Fantasy II once did, still keeping the draconic design for the logo, though the 3, which is actually used in the using crystalline design in the background, though because Final Fantasy III, because of Final Fantasy III being used to save the crystals once again, just like in the original Final Fantasy, for one reason, just for that reason, but also as a foreshadowing to the game's final dungeon, the Crystal Tower. But eventually, when the game got remade for the Nintendo DS, it used this logo being used as this game's version of the Warrior of Light, or better known as the Onion Knight, which this is actually, where this comes from, is once again, the original concept design for Yoshitaka Amano's artwork when Square was already working on the game. I can even find the exact picture. Here it is. Though once again, based on the Yoshitaka Amano art design during the concept art of the game. Even, yeah, never mind. I forgot what I was gonna say. But now, moving on to Final Fantasy IV, there's two separate logos that we're actually gonna look at, and I'm not gonna include Final Fantasy IV The After Years, as I will be talking about logos to Final Fantasy sequels for another time by sometime in the future. So now, solely sticking to Final Fantasy IV, this is used for the original design for Final Fantasy IV during the Super Famicom era Final Fantasy games, with one of the game's secondary protagonists, Kane Highwind, which was also a fan favorite character, and also a lot of people's favorite Dragoon, even though this game was not really the first appearance of the Dragoon, as that goes to Richard Highwind from Final Fantasy II. As to why they chose him for the logo specifically, probably just a sell. Probably, yeah, solely. And I just want to see the chat for a moment. Okay, nobody's there yet. Sorry. But eventually, when the game got the same treatment for the Nintendo DS remake as Final Fantasy III, we got ourselves a new logo, though still keeping with the purple theme. But instead of using Kane Highwind, it instead used one of the game's major antagonists, Golbez. Though again, I'm not really sure. But I'm not really sure as to why being focused on that main antagonist solely. But eventually, moving on from Final Fantasy IV to now from Final Fantasy V, we now have something that is something more of a story element to pretty much hook the player in. Instead of introducing one of the game's central antagonists or one of the game's antagonists, it instead features the Windrix, which is one of the game's endangered species. Throughout the game. And as to why they're being endangered, as they would either as sacrificing themselves to even save the main characters, and but also from very much of the danger that the world is in right now because of the destruction of the crystals due to Exdeath's return. And last, but certainly not least, we have, there we go, Final Fantasy VI, it wouldn't even load up. As now being focused more on the red, being centralized as I think that was actually the main color of the Castilian Empire, I think. Though in logo, having Terra being used as the representative for the logo, and possibly actually main character, so much so as she's actually used in Dissidia, whilst flying, looks like she's flying on top of a Magitag, as the constant war between the the War of the Magi, the War of the Espers, and the Gastalian Empire with magic versus technology, as this is the very first time Final Fantasy has ever used technology. Actually, or not, actually not, actually no, that wasn't the first time. It was actually Final Fantasy 1, when technology was actually used as a conflict between it and magic in this one, to which Final Fantasy 7 would later use that concept. William Silva, how you doing? And this stream actually turned up a lot quicker than originally expected, as there was really much nothing I could even say about when it comes to, as the logos were very much just straightforward and at least to the point. And given how Final Fantasy is a very story-driven franchise, each of the logos are used differently and more so as a hook to even hook you in straight into the story. But, wow, this stream actually turned up way quicker than I originally expected. This would pretty much be a full-fledged video anyway. Yeah, not much saying, my friends, but yeah, but that basically pretty much about does it, as that's basically all I could basically say. And yeah, that about at least does it for this video now. Yeah, I'm sorry this turned out quick, William Silva, because I wish I would have made this a full-fledged video, but I did want to present the logos just pretty much here in the live stream format. Anyway, that about does it for this video, but I do appreciate you for coming, though. Oh, sorry. Anyways, but yeah, that about does it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like what you saw, click like and subscribe. And subscribe and share with your family and friends, and make sure you ring that notification bell. That way you get notified of my latest videos. And be sure you stay tuned for this Friday once again on my channel, as that will be a full-fledged video for episode 4 of Final Fantasy Rolls, as I will be covering the Monk class. And once again, thank you guys so much for watching. This is Final Fantasy Fan 12 signing off, and remember, may the light forever shine upon us.